Hey there, Gabriel Clevenger here, pastor at the table. So I'm here with another Faith and CrossFit video. I'm going to talk today about something I had thought about a little bit before, but it really came into focus the other day, just this week. I was with a group of people doing the workout of the day. It was low impact that day, and I was thinking I was going to do pretty well with it, for me anyway. So we got through the warm-up and began the actual time part. I started out well. There were air squats, and I was moving through. Well, the coach for that day, I won't say his name, but it rhymes with Jeff, came over to me during the workout and reminded me to go deeper on the squat. Well, I thought I was, but I took his advice and began to consciously go deeper on the movement than I had been. So I finished the workout, thought I did great, for me, again. He came over to me again when no one was around and reminded me that when I'm moving fast, it's pretty easy to think that I'm going all the way down without actually doing it. And I also needed to change my feet position. I was like, great, I thought I'd solved the problem, but I didn't. So as it turns out, even when you've done something literally thousands of times before, it's possible to shortcut it or start doing it wrong in the moment. If he hadn't pointed it out, I never would have known. So that's one of the reasons you have coaches there, right? So that got me thinking. I thought, okay, well, what else do coaches do? I could see some parallels, and so I started wondering what else coaches do. The coach also works to ensure the safety of the people there as they attempt these things that are challenging, both with avoiding unsafe things being done and helping people do new things safely, getting accustomed to doing those movements. I mean, you remember the first time you tried to do a squat snatch or kettlebells or something like that. A lot of those movements are not natural, but they are good to learn. And you're going to do them wrong at first, but you do it anyway. You get correction and advice, and then you do it some more, and then you get better. But even after years, you will still need someone there watching you who knows what's going on, who's trained to know how is right to do those things, who can help you do those movements rightly and therefore safely, right? You'll still need to do the pieces of the movements again to refresh your knowledge and remind your body. It's not that you forget in your mind, but you can certainly forget with your body. The coaches had to learn things about CrossFit, about their own abilities, and they've had to be tested and evaluated on certain standards. Is it possible to have someone who has completed all that training and still be a bad coach? Certainly. But it's impossible to be a really good coach without that training. Now, for how this relates to a life of faith in Jesus. Just like CrossFit, a life of faith in Jesus is not like someone telling you some basic things and turning you loose to go do your best or just have fun. Just like CrossFit, you can get seriously hurt that way, even with the best of intentions. It's true that faith in Jesus is what we're made for, so in that way it's the most natural thing for you to do. And there's an element of individuality in that each person will have to make his or her own decision to pursue a life following Jesus. But experience also teaches us that in zeal, eagerness, excitement, we can easily fall prey to poor habits, practices, even in the best circumstances. So here's how a good pastor is like a good coach. There's a few things. That pastor is competent and knowledgeable, which comes with experience. Good intentions and a good heart are good and important, necessary, I would say, but not sufficient alone. Some will tell you they don't need to prove anything to anybody and don't need any training. And I'm not making a categorical statement here, but I'll just offer this suggestion, or this illustration. The Apostle Paul, the author of a large portion of what we call the New Testament, the portion of the Bible written after Jesus' life, death, resurrection, and ascension, that Paul had a personal encounter with the risen Christ that resulted in his own temporary blindness and radically altered the rest of his life. This Paul, in one of his letters, Galatians, writes of how he did not presume to jump right into telling people what and how to act or believe. He went away for years, even though he had been training all his life up to that point and had been promoted for how intelligent and good he was at his clergy job. He knew he had to get everything straight before he came back to try to lead people or give a message. Again, I'm not saying that there can't be a good pastor without tons of formal training, and I'm certainly not saying that every pastor who has finished official schooling is a good one. But in general, it is important for a pastor to have learned how to pastor and been evaluated, and for them to always have someone who can tell them if they need to change or do something better, no matter how long they've been at it. Now, it's also important for pastors, just like CrossFit coaches, to ensure the safety of those under their care. This should go without saying, but I'll make it plain and I'll leave it at this. Emotional, sexual, spiritual abuse is as far from the role of a pastor as can possibly be imagined. I would say more about this, but we'll just stop there with that for now. Now, maybe you're thinking a pastor like that would be great, but I don't have good experience with pastors, and I understand. For that, I apologize. That brings me to a tough point for me to acknowledge, and that's a way in which CrossFit is actually superior to the way church in America usually works. It's this. When someone goes to a CrossFit or a boot camp or a Y fitness class or whatever it is, they don't expect to go and watch, right? Sure, there's an element of observation to see something done well, but they don't sign up for a class to go and just watch the coach do the workout. When you're watching how to do a movement, the watching is in order for you to do the movement well. Church in America, by and large, sadly, is a spectator sport. I'll admit that. It's not the way it's supposed to be. But if people go to a worship service, it is set up such that they go in, take their seats in a theater or a classroom setup, and then they watch the professionals sing and speak. If everything is done well, so to speak, people leave with some sense of accomplishment in that they attended or that they enjoyed what they saw. But they don't have any real understanding of how any of what they just saw and heard applies to the rest of their week or month, however often they go. I'm not saying that was the people's fault, but it has happened. You see, this is a fundamental problem of understanding what the church is for and not knowing what it really does, and it's widespread. The last thing I'll say about these two roles and how they compare is that in the heat of living, things that you thought you had worked out and that you're good at, you end up shortcutting or doing wrong. You're working so hard to keep going or get finished at things in life that you end up falling into a bad form, unintentionally. And in this case, with bad form, you risk not only hurting yourself, but you also risk hurting others with your very life. You need someone knowledgeable who's watching out for you to be able to come alongside you and tell you when you need to do it a little differently. Not for the coach to get points or status, not for that pastor to get points or status, but for your own growth in the process of being a disciple, being an apprentice of Jesus. Here I'm not talking about singing or smiling or being nice better. I'm not talking about church performance things. I'm talking about the things that we do, enacting love of God and love of neighbor. None of us is particularly good at that when we first start, right? That takes practice and learning the movements from someone who knows how to coach you in them and how to give you good feedback on where you're doing well and where you need to step it up a little bit. You need God's help to do this well. God's help is more than help from others, but it won't be less than that. Listen, I would love to talk to you about any questions you have or things you would like to discuss further. If you haven't ever had an experience with a pastor like what I've talked about here, please let me know, and I personally will work to change that. I hope to talk to you soon. Be watching for the next one. God bless you. Bye-bye.